well, this morning we are going to be looking at chapter 5 in our book, which talks about managing technology in our home. And so we've covered so much ground in these first few chapters, and I really think the author does an incredible job of talking about the child-centered approach to parenting, talking about our pursuit of happiness really through our kids, and kind of the wrong focus that we can have there. And so if you have not read these chapters so far, I really would encourage you to listen to them, read them, whatever you need to do. But those first 4 chapters especially, I know that you won't regret the time that you spent in that material. But today we're going to be talking about technology. And a few years ago, The Atlantic interviewed a 13-year-old girl, and the author had this to say about that interview. He said, "She told me she'd spent most of the summer hanging out alone in her room with her phone, that's just the way her generation is. And then she said, we didn't have a choice to know any life without iPads or iPhones. And I think we like our phones more than we like actual people." Listen to these statistics, and I've told you some of these statistics before. It's been about 3 years, and I updated them, and I just want you to know everything's gotten worse, okay? The average American user checks their phone 96 times a day. 96 times. That's as many as 6 to 7 times every hour. On average, people spend about 40% of their waking hours on a screen. And although research tells us that anything over 4 hours a day leads to a much higher risk of depression, American adults spend about 7 hours a day looking at a screen. Let's talk about kids. Elementary age kids with 2 or more hours a day of screen time are more likely to have social, emotional, and attention issues. Now, a study from Microsoft did have a little bit of good news, and that is that we are becoming better multitaskers, but at the expense of our attention span, which has dropped to 8 seconds, which is shorter than the attention span of a goldfish at 9 seconds, okay? So we're really winning here, guys. So the bottom line is screen time is altering both our actual brain structure and its function. But the problem is, you know all of this. I know all of this. It's everywhere. It's everywhere telling us the negative effect that screen time is having on us. We know that it is not healthy. We know that it's hurting us. And guess what? We continue to do it. Myself included. And there's a word for that, and it's called addiction. And I want you to look at the definition of addiction before you think I've kind of maybe gone a little too far with this. Addiction is defined as the repeated involvement with a substance or an activity despite the substantial harm it now causes, because that involvement was and may continue to be pleasurable and or valuable. And so what we've learned is that every time we look at our screens, whether it's scrolling and seeing some new post, or whether it's a like on something that we've posted, or a comment, or even a text or an email, we get a little hit of dopamine. And dopamine is the feel-good neurotransmitter in your brain. It helps us with attention, but it also causes addiction. So every time we get a hit of this chemical, our brains are motivated to continue focusing on that thing, to continue focusing on that screen for longer and longer. We are literally wiring our brains to crave more screen time. And so your phone becomes like this little portable cocaine pellet dispenser. And the result of this addiction is that, according to the Pew Research Center, over half of teens, well over half, associate the absence of their cell phone with at least one of these three emotions. And I'm wondering if maybe this is true for adults as well. Loneliness, being upset, or feeling anxious. And at the same time, parents admit that they struggle with the allure of screens as well. And over half of teens say that they often find their parent or caregiver to be distracted by their own cell phone when they're trying to have a conversation with them. It's not just about our kids. We, the adults, have a problem as well. But again, this isn't news to any of us. The bigger issue is that we know we have a problem, but we aren't doing anything about it. Because recognizing that we have a problem is great, but it doesn't really change anything. I was home a few years ago, and I was working around the house, and it was, one of those days that the calendar had fallen right, and it had been, a few days since I'd showered or washed my hair or anything, but I'm like, we're just doing stuff around the house today. Well, one of the kids came in and they were like, Mom, I need something for this project. Can you take me to Walmart? And I said, okay, let me go just put some shoes on. So I walked back to our closet, which required me walking past a mirror, and I kind of glanced and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, something, I don't know if this is okay. Like, I don't know if I can go to Walmart looking like this. And I kind of stopped there for a minute, but then that People of Walmart page popped into my head. You've seen that? And so I looked in the mirror again, and I was kind of like, well, I think it might be okay to go to Walmart. See, I knew that there were some problems, but I didn't do anything about it. So recognizing that we have a problem is great, but it doesn't change anything. And we can't just throw up our hands and say, well, this is just how it is. This is just the culture that we live in. Just going to have to get used to it. Something has to change. And we have to get ourselves right before we can focus on our kids. But how do we do that? Because behavior modification, like just trying to spend less time on our phones, it doesn't work. In order for us to change the behavior, we have to understand what's driving it. We have to understand the why behind the behavior before we can change the behavior itself. We know that we have a problem when it comes to screens and technology and social media and all of the things that we fill our minds with. So in an effort to make lasting change, we have to ask the question why. And I think that the answer is bigger and deeper than we even realize. I think that what we're seeking is life. And God tells us where life is found. He said it's found in me, life abundantly. But we're looking to our phones for a life that is happy and full and meaningful and satisfied. And isn't that the definition of an idol? Something other than Jesus that we are looking to for life. Because John 14:6 tells us that Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Because see, the problem is that Satan offers substitutes for the things that God designed. And they look really good. I don't know if you remember the days of going to restaurants and they would bring around the dessert tray. And you're like, man, that looks amazing. And you walk out an hour later and it's like sitting at the front and it looks exactly the same. And you go, oh, I don't think that's what I think it is. I think that ice cream is probably like Crisco or something like that. But those fakes look really good. Sometimes even better than the real thing. And so sometimes these substitutes look good. They even look better than what God offers. But once we take the bait, we find out the truth. That it was a trick. It was a bait and switch. Satan gets us to buy into this. saying, this is what you're looking for. It's easier than what God has to offer you. It's better than what God has to offer you. And it draws us in only for us to find that it's not what we thought we were getting. So I want us to look at 3 things today that I think we are seeking in technology and what we're truly getting instead. First, I think we're seeking rest. Who's tired? Yes, the rest of you just aren't raising your hand because you're writing or didn't want to. We're all tired. You're too tired to raise your hand, yeah. We want a break physically and mentally, and so we turn to our screens as entertainment, but instead of rest, what we're getting is escape. And I want you to think about that word for a minute, escape. What comes to your mind? To me, it's like watching some Prison Break movie, and the guy is just like broken out, and he is running for his life in the dark, through the woods. That is not restful. Escape is not restful. And so instead of getting true rest, what we get when we turn to our screens is just noise that drowns out what's going on in our lives. We're not truly escaping from it. We're just numbing away from it. Numbing the pain that we might be dealing with. It's a distraction from whatever is going on in our lives. But even when we are resting and scrolling through our phones, our brains are not resting. Our body may be laying on the couch, but our brain is not resting. And when we legitimately do have moments of rest in our day, what do? We grab our phones and we fill that time. 77% of people said that when nothing is occupying their attention, the first thing they do is reach for their phone. I will admit I am so guilty of this. At a stoplight, waiting in line, anywhere when I have nothing to do, I'm looking for something because I have trained my brain to need it. We also believe that our devices promise more efficiency and effectiveness in our work, and whether that is work at a job that actually pays you money, or whether that is work in just taking care of your kids and keeping up with the sign-up geniuses and the homeworks and the Blackboard and all the assignments that are due. But in reality, instead of having more time to rest because we're more efficient, now we're just always connected to our work. We've lost our boundaries, and we're always available, which means we're stressed and we're burned out. We are longing for rest. We desperately need it, but what we're actually getting is escape. Second, we're looking for relationship, but we're settling for impersonal connection. Sherry Turkle wrote a book, Reclaiming Conversation, and she says this: computers offer the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. You should hear that again. They offer the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. And then, as the programs get really good, the illusion of friendship without the demands of intimacy. Relationships are hard, right? But impersonal connection, it's a lot easier. I have a friend that I grew up with, and she lives here in town, but we never see each other. We just run in completely different circles. But she posts a lot about her family and her kids and everything on social media. And she's got 4 kids. I've only ever met one in person. And I ran into them one day. And I'm walking up, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I feel myself walking up to hug one of her kids, who I have never in my life, and certainly in not their life, have met. And I realize I feel like I know them because of everything she posts, but we've never actually seen each other face to face. Thank goodness I stopped myself before I freaked out those kids. but it is the illusion of relationship. And as we look more and more to our devices and digital communication, then we communicate less and less face to face. And as this happens, we lose the ability to communicate fully. And here's what I mean by that. Have you ever sent a text message or an email that was misunderstood? I mean, if you haven't, will you come find me after, because I need your help? Because those digital messages are missing tone. They're missing nonverbal communication. They're missing so much more than just the words that they say. But we no longer feel comfortable having a real life conversation. If your kids aren't old enough, you are going to navigate this with them. You are going to say to them, you cannot do that over text. You have to have that conversation face to face. And it's going to be one of the most terrifying things they have ever done, is had a face-to-face conversation with somebody, because they don't know how to talk to each other, much less how to talk to an adult. Now, maybe you're thinking, Carrie, it's not that bad. You're kind of dramatizing this a little bit. Well, let me ask you this. Let's just say that tonight you're going to order dinner out. Are you going to pick up the phone and call them? Or are you going to order online? Let's say you have to make an appointment for something. Are you going to pick up the phone and call and talk to the person? Or are you going to jump online and see if they have online booking? This is a problem. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but the consequences go deeper than we realize. Because when we stop communicating face to face, we lose the opportunity to develop emotional intelligence and empathy. And empathy is what bonds us to each other. It's how we learn how to read between the lines. It's how we learn the effect of our words on the people around us. And so it becomes more difficult for us to learn how to form true relationships without empathy. And managing relationships becomes harder. And so then what happens? Well, it drives us back to our phones, because that's a lot easier. And it becomes this self-perpetuating cycle. We also miss opportunities to build relationships. What used to be empty moments are now filled with checking our phone. We don't sit in the doctor's office just kind of looking around or flipping through a magazine. We don't wait in the grocery store line or any other line without pulling out our phones. We don't strike up conversations with people that we're randomly forced to be next to. Instead, we turn to our screens and we fill those times with the noise. And when we do interact, our attention is divided. Sherry Turkle puts it this way. She says, we are forever elsewhere. We are forever elsewhere. She calls it continuous partial attention. And that's becoming accepted as the norm, but it is not healthy for us. I want you to think about your kids. I want you to think about your marriage. Continuous partial attention doesn't cut it. I want you to think about how different it feels when you're talking to your husband and he's saying, yeah, oh yeah, sure. Versus when he puts his phone down and he looks you in the eye while you're talking to him. We have to start doing that for people. Our kids don't talk anymore. They don't look out the window of the car while we're driving. They're watching a movie or a show on a screen as we drive them to the next stop. And here's why this is such a big deal. Relationships, casual relationships, but also our deepest, most important relationships in our lives are built in these small moments. We don't want to realize that. We want to think that it's about the big moments and the intentional things, but those relationships are built in the small, in-between times of our lives. But the problem is we are using technology to hide from ourselves and to hide from others, and it is killing our relationships. Thirdly, we want control, but what we're getting is anxiety and addiction. We've talked some about control in here. The thing about online communication is it allows us to at least minimize our risk in a conversation, because we can edit and we can revise and we can backspace and retype and we can read over it for an hour before we send it, rather than having to have a conversation in real time. We also don't have to engage those hard parts of a face-to-face conversation. We can send it and hope that they respond well, rather than having to actually watch their face respond. We can control when we engage and how much we engage. And when we feel insecure or uncomfortable in a situation, we can pull out our new security blanket and stare into it like we're doing something important, rather than having just walked into a room where I don't really know anybody and I'm not sure what to do. We can control what we post. We can control the image that we present. But in doing so, we're creating then a false version of ourselves that then we have to figure out kind of how to maintain and how to live up to. And there's pressure to be perfect, but at the same time to #keep it real. And so in the pursuit of control, in an attempt to lessen our worries and stress, do you see how we're just creating more for ourselves? We only find more anxiety. And so we continue to feed the addiction, and it just gets stronger and stronger until we are out of control and we've become slave to the devices in our hands. So what should we do? We've talked about this problem enough. And it can seem overwhelming and it can seem hopeless at times. But I want you to hear what God says in Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 20. He says, "Now what I am commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. No, the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you may obey it. See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. For I commanded you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in obedience to him, to keep his commands, his decrees and laws. And then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you're not obedient, if you are drawn away to bow down to other gods and worship them, I declare to you this day that you will certainly be destroyed. I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, that you may love the Lord your God and listen to his voice and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." God is asking us, which one will you choose? Where will you set your gaze? Where will you focus your attention? We have to make a conscious choice not to be drawn away to bow down to other gods, but to choose life. So how do we do this? Well, we have to recognize we are not fighting a human battle where human power and strength can be our weapon. Instead, we see in Ephesians 6:12, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm." Guys, we are fighting a spiritual battle, so we need spiritual strength and we need spiritual weapons. So the number one thing that you can do is invite God into this area. Ask the Holy Spirit to come and to help you. Bring this idol that we have created, that we are looking to for life, and confess that to God. And say, "God, I'm looking to the wrong place. Help me to set my heart on you." Because he tells us that we don't accomplish things by might or by power, but by his Spirit. Now, there are some practical things that we can do both for ourselves and for our kids, and I'm not going to spend much time on these because you can Google a list of practical ways to decrease your screen time, but take an extended break just to recognize how addicted you are. That might even look like taking 4 hours, 2 hours, I don't know, and setting your phone somewhere where if you had to go find it, you would recognize how many times you're going to it out of habit and addiction. Set some no phone times and zones. The dinner table, the car. Man, if you could start that when your kids are young, you will be so glad that you did. So glad that you did. Because the car is one of those in-between times where relationships happen. And if we don't teach our kids and ourselves to be alone, they will only be lonely. Set time limits for your kids and for yourself. Don't go to your phone out of boredom or insecurity. Teach your kids good device etiquette and good boundaries. Teach them how to listen to someone. When someone's speaking to them, teach them how to put their phone down and look them in the eye. Then put your phone out of sight when you're having a meal or a coffee with someone. Research shows that even if you're not looking at it, just your phone sitting on the table in sight makes a difference. And it changes what we talk about. Above all, be present. Don't be forever elsewhere. I love this phrase. It says, be where your feet are. It means make your mind and your body be in the same place. Because life and death are literally being set before you and me. We don't realize it because the stakes are so small, but they add up. And it's costing us our life, and we literally have to make a choice on where we will set our attention, life or death. Because the problem is not going away. And so we have to learn how to deal with technology in a way that honors God and brings life and rest and connection, not just a cheap imitation of those things. And as we think about our attention, I want to just close by quoting Pastor Ben Stewart from a sermon that he preached recently where he said, "You are responsible for your attention." He said, "Your attention stirs your affections because what you behold is what you become. And what you think about, you will care about. And what you care about, you will chase. And that will determine what you love, which determines who you become." What you think about, you will care about. What you care about, you will chase. And that determines what you love and who you will become. So where is our attention? Matthew 6:21 puts it this way. "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So as we go this week, let's ask ourselves, what are we treasuring? Not what do we want to treasure, but if we honestly look at our lives and our time and our attention, what are we treasuring? God, thank you for your grace. Thank you for your patience with us. Thank you that even in hard subjects, God, you don't condemn us, you don't guilt us or shame us for the way that we're living our lives, God, but you call us up. You call us to your ways, which are higher than our ways. You call us to life and life abundantly. And God, would you not let us be deceived by Satan, who's bringing around that tray of fake things and saying, doesn't this look good? Don't let us be fooled. Don't let us be drawn away by other gods. God, would you make us keenly aware of the choices that we're making every day? Would you soften our hearts to recognize the time that we are spending in a search for life, and remind us that life is found in you and you alone? God, would you help us navigate this crazy world that we live in? God, we have to navigate it. So would you teach us how to do that in a healthy way for our own hearts, for our kids, and for our families? God, we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.